computer. Hello, everyone. This is the Kubernetes SIG cluster lifecycle cluster API office hours on February 22nd. Welcome. We follow the CNCF code of conduct during this meeting. So that basically means be nice to each other. And if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. It's generally under reactions. And please feel free to add your name to the attending list. It's tradition around here for new folks to get a chance to introduce themselves. So if anyone wants to speak up and introduce themselves, please unmute and say hi.
Hi, I'm a member of the Kubernetes cluster team at Indeed. So I'd like to talk about cluster autoscaler stuff at some point during this meeting, but thanks for having me.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining. Anybody else? I don't see anyone else unmuting, so let's get started with our agenda. Open proposal readouts. Okay, there are no open proposal readouts. Does anyone want to give any updates on any of the other stale proposals? No. Okay. I don't see any hands raised, so let's move on. Move on to the discussion topics. First, Stefan, you're the first one.
Yep. Can you open the issue that I linked here as part of in a PR description?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we have this issue open since roughly 3 weeks, which is about which Kubernetes versions we are testing, supporting, maintaining actively in core cluster API. And I now opened a PR. So my impression was about a discussion that we had on the issue that there's basically agreement on the versions we want to support. And then there were some, I don't know if it was even diverging opinions, but then there was a discussion around how would we implement some safeguards that, I don't know, do we want to block certain versions on a webhook, on a controller, in cluster kernel, I don't know what. What I would want to do is the following. I would essentially split the two discussions. So one thing is like, what is the policy? What are we testing? What are we actively looking out for that version actually works in the sense of test coverage, we're accepting bug fixes, all that kind of stuff. And the other part is are we implementing some sort of safeguards and how strict are they and can I opt out and all that sort of stuff. We have an issue for that since at least a few months. So I was more like linking to that one. And I essentially just opened a PR for documenting the policy. And once we have that merged, the only thing that I would do is I would ensure that we are only testing what we actually want to support. And we can also go over our existing code and essentially drop code powers for old releases. I don't know if that will actually drop in code, if that will actually happen in the 1.4 release, but I would like to get a policy in if we have general consensus on what a policy should be, and also to already reduce our test coverage. We had a point last week about resource usage in the Kubernetes project and saving money and not using the old registry. So I think it would be really good if like we have basically agreement that we can get us in for 1.4, so we can already reduce our test footprint. Yep. And the main thing I want to ask is like, do we have general agreement? Any objections? Can we set a lazy consensus? What's like the general feeling about that?
I don't see any hands raised. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? I don't see any hands raised. So I guess folks can always go on the PR and as well as the issue and comment there about their thoughts on the new proposed doc update for the Kubernetes version support. And if they have any concerns, I guess they can also raise it there.
Yep. Then I would say let's set the latest consensus for a week. And I mean, of course, if there are any objections, which are more like minor dognets, then
Okay.
I mean, we only merge
Okay.
it if we actually have agreement, of course, as usual.
Awesome. Sounds good. Any more thoughts on this? I don't see any hands raised. Matt, moving on to the next one. Matt, you have the next one.
Thanks. So a few weeks ago, we ran into a pretty large production outage while trying to do a node update. We use machine deployments with CAPI, and when this occurred, we cluster autoscaler wound up setting the our total node count in the cluster down from 800 down to about 400, which is pretty scary. About 2 weeks later, we've been digging through the code trying to understand how this could even happen. We have no max unavailable set on these node groups, so we were a bit surprised. But really, it comes down to the way that cluster autoscaler tries to handle nodes that fail to provision within a certain window of time. It will effectively mark them with an annotation saying hey, prefer to delete this, please. And then it'll also drop the replica count of a node group. I think that this behavior is probably not healthy, given that the replica count should probably stay fixed, and cluster autoscaler probably shouldn't be manipulating that in order to try to delete nodes effectively. I guess I'd like to get thoughts on whether we could shift the deletion of nodes away from cluster being something that cluster autoscaler is responsible for to something that CAPI or the actual providers are handling, such as with these example PRs that kind of show that we could basically take out the logic that does the downscaling in this situation whenever a node is failing to become healthy from cluster autoscaler's point of view, allow it to still set the annotation and then automatically, and then rely on CAPI to actually do the deprovisioning of any nodes that are marked for deletion. So, does anyone have thoughts on this?
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the detail that went into that issue. This is complicated, and I think the proposal that you're putting forth now, it does make sense to me. And one thing we have to keep in mind though is that the cluster API provider implementation that we've put forward descended from an earlier time in development, and so cluster API isn't the only consumer of that provider right now. We also use the machine API against that. So I think we'd have to really think about adding this change in, because it would require anyone who's using that to have to make the same change to their providers as well. Yeah. So I think what you're proposing makes good sense. I would just like some time to kind of check the details and make sure that we could actually do this change for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I think what we're trying to propose here is that we don't change the default behavior of cluster autoscaler or of CAPI. We would basically be setting up flags that can be enabled to set up this functionality. And I think that would effectively allow providers to opt into supporting this.
Yeah, I saw that flag on there, and that makes good sense to me. Yeah.
Fabricio, go ahead.
Yeah. So thanks first of all, thanks for reaching out. Second, I have to read the issue trying to fill in some gap about how the autoscaler works and how the two pieces fit good together. But what I'm wondering is that, so what happened is that the cluster autoscaler, for some reasons, decided to drop the
replica count for
the replica
deployment.
count.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What will prevent the cluster autoscaler to go and mark 400 nodes for deletion in one shot? And what will be the difference? And what will be the difference?
So to go into the issue slightly a little bit more detail, the reason that cluster autoscaler is marking these nodes for deletion is because they're failing to join within a time window. So these are effectively, cluster autoscaler has upscaled a node group and then is waiting for new nodes to be provisioned in order to join this. And then after 10 or 15 minutes, it says of the node not failing to join or not having joined yet, cluster autoscaler will say, this one failed for whatever reason, we're going to mark it for deletion, downscale the group, and then try again. But if you have enough of those nodes in that stuck in provisioning status, then cluster autoscaler, there is no restriction on how much cluster autoscaler can downscale simultaneously while it's occurring. And so even if you have like a minimum node group set, this bug still bypasses the hard minimum set on a node group due to how cluster autoscaler tries to cancel a node that's stuck in provisioning status. Sorry, go ahead.
Mike, go ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know if Fabrizio had a follow-up there. I'm guessing that you tried this, Matt, but did you do anything around extending the time that the autoscaler will allow for a node to join? You know, I forget what it's called. It's not unneeded.
The max node provision time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we've definitely we've been trying to lower that because of we're trying to support like fallback instance types between and also like, so we can only do one node group per AZ. We're working in AWS, so we have to have we end up using 3 node groups in order to support like a particular instance type in each AZ. And then also if we want to support like 3 different types of instance fallbacks, we have to have the max node provision time low enough for cluster autoscaler to actually fall back to other instance types. And it also like falls back to each AZ first. And so even if you have a 5-minute max node provision time, it takes 15 minutes for it to try the next instance type. So,
totally. Your usage case is hitting this directly head on. So yeah, I can appreciate that. Wow, what a problem.
Yep.
Fabrizio.
Yeah, I have also a follow-up question. So it seems if I got it right, the autoscaler in your case is targeting directly machine sets. And if instead, if I think to cluster API in machine deployments, we have strategies that will prevent with max available and unavailable that will help to prevent such type of improvisation drop. So let me say, I'm trying to understand the issue. What I want to make sure is that we are not trying to fix the problem in the wrong place, first of all, and this will take some research from me. Second, we are not trying to solve a problem that is already solved in cluster API.
Yep. No, I think our goal is to let cluster API do its thing correctly, is really like what we're trying to do or to propose with this approach. Because like really like to us, the problem is that cluster autoscaler shouldn't really be manipulating the replica count in order to try and cancel nodes. It should be setting the replica count to the right amount and then letting cluster API do the rest effectively. And right now, it's due to legacy reasons of how what interfaces were available. This is basically the only way that cluster autoscaler was allowed to cancel nodes, by giving cluster API a preference or a preferred annotation to say, hey, please prefer this one for deletion whenever you do, and then telling it to downscale. But that's I don't think that the downscaling behavior is a good thing at all, even in like normal behavior when there's not a node rollout occurring.
Yeah, thank you. I will take a look. First impression is that if we try to fix, so in cluster API, the machine set is a pretty dumb abstraction. So it does not have rollout policies, it does not have a max and available, etc., etc. So if you go in a machine set, you set a replica 400, it just delete 400 replica. But that's the same will happen if you apply 400 labels to the machines, and then the next reconciler will delete all 400 replicas in one shot.
Sorry, the distinction here is that the machines that are being deleted are different because whenever you have 2 different machine sets active during like a node rollout from like a new spec or from one spec to another, cluster API is going to like start to downscale the old ones. That's kind of the crux of this issue. And so in the case, you're correct saying that like if we have 400 annotations that are saying, hey, please delete me, 400 nodes are going to be deleted by CAPI with this proposal. but these 400 nodes would be the nodes that are stuck in provisioning status, which actually haven't destroyed or haven't entered the cluster yet. Thus, we're not going to be kicking off any workloads and causing issues.
Okay, I have to take a look.
Yeah, I think in general, if we have to do something here, putting it behind a flag is the smartest way to go. Although, like, I will note that the upstream has gotten slightly sensitive about the number of flags that are in the cluster autoscaler now, so that might not survive contact if we end up going that way. But I think to kind of what Fabrizio is talking about, like, I'm also like really curious about, like, we had always kind of assumed that the cluster autoscaler could just kind of manipulate the replicas and then the controllers behind them would do the right things. And so, yeah, like I'd like to have a better understanding of how that's not working the way we want it to here. And does it really require more of a change on the cluster API side necessarily than the autoscaler side? So yeah, like I'll definitely spend some time reading this as well.
Great discussion, folks. Are there any follow-ups on this? Does anyone have any other questions, concerns?
I guess the final question is, seeming like it's not like unreasonable to do this, and if it's properly feature gated, then it seems like we could proceed just with PRs and continue discussion on those in detail. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I'm down
works for
with
me.
that for sure.
Yeah.
Looks good. Great. Thanks, folks. Thanks for the great discussion. If there are no follow-ups, let's move to the next item. Okay, I don't see any hands. Mike, you have the next one.
Yeah, so this PR has been open for a while now. It's basically about adding some annotations so that in scale from 0 scenarios, users could specify the labels and taints kind of manually. And we had talked about this several weeks ago, and I know there have been a few reviews. Fabrizio, you had a couple open, or you had an open question here, I thought, about, yeah, like this part here. And I just wanted to make sure, like I'm keen to merge this, but I wanted to make sure you didn't have any sort of follow-up questions or anything, you know, or objections to us kind of merging it.
I don't have objection. Let me say, it was just a question if we can think to a better UX by inferring information instead of creating them, asking user to specify them. But the answer was, this is the first iteration. We will continue. So I'm okay with this approach.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, my impression with the annotations is like they're always left as kind of an escape route or whatever for a user, right? They're a way to override. So, all right, cool. I will probably merge this later on today then. So thank you.
Great. Are there any questions, concerns on this? I don't see any hands going on. I have the next one, which is, I believe last week or the week before that, we had this discussion about doing a 4-month release cadence for CAPI for the rest of 2023, and then going back and revisiting how we want to do, how often we want to do releases in 2024. So with that, I created a PR that gives us like the preliminary release dates for the 1.5 release cycle with the 4-month release cadence as discussed. PR is open. Please take a look on the date. So it roughly follows the same release frequency that we had for 1.4. It's close to 17 weeks, just as 1.4. And the dates have been just calculated based on when 1.4 ends and when we want 1.5 to release, and then we fill in the dates in between. So folks, if please take a look and provide feedback on that. Does anyone have any questions, concerns on this? I don't see any hands raised. Moving on. Joe, you have the next one. You want to share screen?
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yes, let me make you co-host.
I'll try to keep it short.
Make co-host, got it. Okay, you
Hey,
should be
cool.
able to share your screen now.
Okay, let's make sure. Okay, cool. Oops, sorry, hold on. I wanted to share screen, not, where's the entire screen?
I don't think it is possible to share screen.
You're right. I forget that every time. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so real quick, I just wanted to give just a quick demo. So the cluster API for OCI we released last week had the support for managed Kubernetes using the new kind of proposed managed solution. So I just wanted to kind of quickly cover that and see if anybody had, questions, comments, concerns over that. So I'm using OpenLens. I'm sorry, I'm not a CLI purist. I apologize. This is just quicker to show, I think. So anyway, I've already spun up my cluster. It takes a little bit to spin that cluster up. And I am going to, let's see if I can grab this here. So using kubectl, get the information I need for our cluster to be able to use the OCI CLI here to set up our kube config. So these commands and everything would be in our book, but this will add our new kube config to my configuration to be able to connect and get access to our OKE, our managed Kubernetes. And so if I go back to, I'm just running this in kind right now locally, but we can see down here in, let's see, it's the, where is it? The managed control, the managed cluster. So and I'll go into the template here in just a second, I apologize. But we have our OCI managed cluster. We're also going to have our OCI managed control plane. And then lastly, our, OCI managed machine pool. So those are our three new kind of data types that we're going to use. And we can see that all of those are running and managing our current nodes. So if I go back to the OKE cluster, we have our 3 working nodes, which is what I launched with. So real quick, let's see if I screen share back over to Firefox here, and you all can see my screen in GitHub, correct?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I shared the right thing. So we have, and this is coming from, this was designed around the option 3 proposal for managed Kubernetes. So we kind of took that and ran with it. So we have our managed cluster, which is going to kind of represent the infrastructure. So like setting up the network and things of that nature. Then we have the OCI managed control plane, which is going to be the OCI like control plane, but kind of the cloud provided cluster. And then lastly, we have the managed machine pools, which is going to be that node pool, I believe is what OKE calls it. And so one of the things, and we kind of ran into a couple of quick short drawbacks. And I think one of them I brought up actually in the community already was we didn't have an atomic way to modify the machine pool from the OCI side of things. So we have to provide our image ID and at the same time also provide the Kubernetes version. So that needed to be in our OCI machine pool spec because otherwise we couldn't upgrade the machine pool without adding that. The other thing, let me see here. So the other thing that we kind of have, and I think everybody's aware of this, is the machine pools are still in experimental phase. So that we have to ask users to not only flag the managed the pools as well as managed clusters. And then right now, and maybe others have already worked through some of this, but I think it's right now it might not be cluster class compatible. Given kind of the current setup, and this is something we can talk about offline or next time. But those are the kind of the three main things we ran into with going this route. One of them's kind of been mitigated, and then the other two will kind of continue to work towards in the future. And one last thing is currently we are supporting all of our current OKE APIs through this and our provider. So that was kind of a quick dump there. But yeah.
Great demo, Joe. That was nice. Let me share my screen back. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, any follow-up comments on that demo? Chat. I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands raised. Yep, it's definitely great to see. Great demo, Joe. Thanks for that. Cecile, go ahead.
Hey, quick question. In OCI, is there a concept of accessing the machine pool instances directly? And have you looked into the machine pool machine proposal and how that might apply to OCI? As far as I'm aware, we were only tracking Kappa and CapC so far, so this adds a new, like, third implementer, which is interesting.
I am not currently, I'll have to go look for that stuff. I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay, I can link the proposal to you if you want to take a look, and we can.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. And I do want to make a real quick call out. This was my colleague Sham who's done this, but the time didn't work for this, so I'm just demoing his hard work.
Thanks for the call out, Sio. Great demo. That was really insightful. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, comments? I don't see any hands raised. Don't have anything under provider updates. I see Jonathan is adding something under the feature groups.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if anyone has anything they want to ask me or discuss about the add-on stuff, we could probably talk about that. If not, we can get ready to wrap up.
Does anyone have any questions about the cluster API add-ons for Helm? Yes, that's the one. I don't see any hands raised. So I guess we're at the end of our agenda then. Thanks, folks. Thanks everyone for joining. See you next week. Oh, Deepak, sorry.
Yeah, hi. Sorry for the late hand raise. So just quick question on the add-on. So is this add-on, like, are we thinking of adding CSI Prometheus also through this add-on framework using Cluster API CRDs or something else?
So with the current add-on provider, the idea is that anything you can install as a Helm chart is considered an add-on.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that helps. Yeah, because we have definitely certain requirements of installing custom operators as well as, so currently we use cluster resource set, which is still an experimental feature. So we want to basically also start adding CSI and bunch of other Prometheus and other things as a package through this whole cluster API framework. So maybe I think I'll probably get in touch with you if you can provide some more details on how to use it. That'll be great.
Yeah, I can link you to the repo, and also if you want to try it out and have questions, you can ping me on Slack. But the main idea is that we have a CRD that specifies a Helm chart, and you can put a label selector on your clusters, and it will install the chart on any cluster selected by the label. You can also configure the values of the Helm chart with values that show up in your cluster as well. For
So-
example, like in the spec.
So does this make the cluster resource set obsolete, or are we still, because currently we use cluster resource set to install CSI driver on all the workload clusters?
Yeah. So cluster resource set is a sort of a temporary measure to get add-ons working, just so people can get started. But that was always going to be deprecated in favor of a more complete add-on story. And this is sort of like the first iteration of that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, if you can send me the link, that'll be great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sounds good.
And Jonathan, if you can also add the link to the repo in the meeting notes, that would be great for anyone who's coming back and watching the recording later.
Okay, cool. Also, I was thinking about publishing or getting some test infra stuff set up to publish an initial image, just so people can try it out if they want to without having to set up tilt and everything. So that's something I'll start working on this week as well.
That sounds good. Does anyone have any last minute questions, concerns, comments, any discussion topics? I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anyone adding anything to the agenda. Thanks everyone for joining. See you all next week. Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks, Yubraj.